Okay, so hey everybody. Today I want to share about a Russian Jeep that I owned when I lived in Afghanistan. Now, I owned the Jeep with another American guy. We went in together to purchase a vehicle, and we enjoyed it for years living there. And after I left Afghanistan, I just left it. Obviously, I left it behind, and I told him just take care of it, enjoy it, and have some fun. So, and that's what I want to talk to you about today is these two, well, the model of Russian Jeep that I owned and a newer version of the Russian Jeep. And I want to tell you a little story and then actually show you some pictures I found online about these Russian Jeeps. Now, a couple of things. The word Jeep is an American word. These are not, you know, and it's also a brand name, but you get the idea. They are Soviet-made vehicles that are four-wheel drive, and they're like the Russian version of the Jeep. Now, the thing about this Soviet Russian models is that they made only two models over a very long period of time. And so one of them is called the WAZ and the other one is called the GAZ. So the first model that they made was GAZ, and they started making that in World War II, and they continued manufacturing that model until 1971. And then in 1971, they began manufacturing another model called the WAZ. The WAZ is the new model, and they continue to manufacture that to this day. So I remember when I was living there, we talked about the old Russian Jeeps or the new Russian Jeeps, and that was sort of how we identified them, or the WAZ and the GAZ. And we kind of, for me anyway, I kind of thought, that's kind of crazy. Here's a country that manufactures vehicles, and they only made two models in 55 years. And but the more I thought about it, and looking back on it now, that there's a lot of wisdom in doing what they did, that they came up with a great model in World War II, and they just continued manufacturing it to 1971. And so there was an abundance of parts that were always available. You could easily find parts. They were robust. The WAZ, or the GAZ, I should say, is the older model, and that's the one that I owned. Very robust, and we were able to take it anywhere. Talk about back roads or off-roading. Afghanistan is probably one of the ultimate locations if you really want to do some off-roading. So I remember one time that my friend Dan and I escorted a convoy of vehicles carrying supplies, and we were escorting them to a central location, meetup location, where there were many other vehicles, especially from the United Nations, that were doing some kind of a distribution of supplies to the central mountains of Afghanistan to help the Hazara people, relief supplies, food. During the winter months, Hazarajat, which is the homeland of the Hazaras in the central mountains of Afghanistan, is virtually cut off from the rest of the world. The roads and mountain passes just freeze with lots of snow, and no one could really go in or out for several months in the winter months. So anyway, so Dan and I escorted a convoy. We met up with all these other trucks and vehicles. The guys that we were in the convoy with, we handed them over to this group of UN trucks, and they continued on their way. We spent a night in that location, and then Dan and I returned, and the trucks and with the United Nations went and they did their thing. And when we were coming back that next day, it may have been a 2-day trip, actually. We may have to spend 2 nights coming back. But anyway, I remember we were going through a little bit of a valley between some mountains, a mountain pass, and somebody started shooting. And it was unclear whether they were shooting at us. There was nobody around. You couldn't see anybody at all. For all practical purposes, just visually, we were in just a very remote location. Nothing is developed, dirt roads, and that was it. And so we were we were going up this mountain to get on the other side and out of that valley when somebody started shooting at us. And well, I don't know if they were shooting at us, but every once in a while they would pop off around, and we just had this feeling that they were watching us and wanting us to get out of there. And we wanted to get out of there, believe me. And so I was driving, I was at the wheel, and we were going up this road, and then it took a sharp 90-degree turn to the left. And it was one of the steepest off roads that I've ever been on. And we just had to go up, I'd say for a quarter of a mile, and then it will level out and we'd be able to get out of there. And I remember going halfway up, or maybe 1/4 of the way up that steep hill, and the engine just died. And I slammed on the brakes, I held the brakes, and Dan wasn't sure if the brakes were going to hold. And it was so steep, and it was just a very weird situation. And then, somebody's shooting, and we didn't know what to do. Because it was very difficult to just let the Jeep roll down without getting out of control. It was just a dangerous situation. And Dan figured out that the GAZ had 2 gas tanks, and you could switch them from one to the other. One was the main gas tank, and there was a reserve tank. And I guess we had it switched to the reserve tank, which didn't really have a gas pump in it. And as a result, when we got at a certain angle, it was not feeding any fuel to the engine, and so it cut off. So we figured out what our situation was and what we needed to do, and so I was able to back down the hill very slowly, back down the mountain very slowly. It was a very narrow road, so there wasn't any room for turning around until I got to the bottom. And meanwhile, this somebody is shooting, and so anyway, we were able to make it down to the bottom. And when I got to the bottom, it was very tricky, because if I would have continued gone straight, we would have fallen off the mountain. So you had to make a sharp turn, and then it leveled out enough to just stay there. And Dan was able to get out. We were able to switch the gas tank, start the engine, and then we went back up the hill and the mountain and went on our way. So that was one of the adventures I had with that vehicle. And I'm going to share my screen with you, if I can figure out how to do this. And here we go. I think this will work. So yeah, here's a page from Wikipedia, and this is the original GAZ model. Now, according to them, they manufactured it from the 1950s. Yeah, 1954 to 1972. That's the model I'm talking about. And let me click on this picture. There you go. So you can see a close-up of this vehicle, and that is exactly the vehicle that we were traveling in this story that I told you. So there, at the time when I lived in Afghanistan, there weren't an abundance of these Jeeps left, but there were quite a few. There were many of them, but most of the Jeeps that we encountered were the new Russian model, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So I'm just kind of amazed that these vehicles, here's a 4-door version of the GAZ, and I'm kind of amazed. I checked a few years back, maybe quite some time back, on the internet to find pictures of these vehicles, and there wasn't much available. But these days, people have added a lot of content about these Russian Jeeps. So this is the GAZ, the old model, GAZ 69, different versions of it, I guess. There's a photograph, kind of reminds me of the story I just told. We crossed a river also in that. So yeah, anyway, that's interesting. So there was one here. That's the 4-door model. There it is. That's the 2-door model. So that's, I'm going to show you some photographs in a minute that show this model better. But anyway, I thought that was pretty good to find that. That's a historical kind of drawing of, I guess, when they first made them and marketed it. And let's see, I thought I had some more photographs here. Okay, here it is. So if you just type in Russian in Google, Russian Jeep GAZ and probably Russian Jeep WAZ, you'll see the 2 different models. And you can see all these here. Some of them have the older fenders, but this one right here, that was the vehicle that we had. And there's a top that's missing off this one. We didn't have white wall tires. But here's another photograph of the front end. That's exactly the vehicle that we had, and it was that color. Ours was unique. Most of them were painted green, and I guess is a stock color, but some of them were yellow, and we had that original yellow paint on it. And some years later, it was painted white, and I've got a photograph somewhere of that. But my photographs are, I don't really have them. They're not accessible to me to show right now. But you can find these Jeeps online, and just a lot of good information, a lot of interesting pictures. Here's one. Let me see if that will show up. It's going to take me to their website. No, I don't like the size of that photograph. I'm trying to find one that shows the top. Maybe this one. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the GAZ with the top. So that's exactly the vehicle that we drove in the yellow original version. Now let's see if I can do the WAZ. So here is the WAZ. If you just go to Wikipedia or Google, just type in Russian Jeep WAZ, you'll see this. And so there's a new model. So these were in abundance in Afghanistan in the 1990s and the early 2000s. Now, after 20 years of a lot of foreign, a lot of changes that took place in Afghanistan during the past 20 years, I know there's many other vehicles available. But at this time, when I lived there, there wasn't any really Western vehicles that were freely or easily available. So the Russian vehicles were just great. And these are well-built vehicles. And I think I missed talking about what I think is how smart it is, or the wisdom. I used to kind of mock it. Oh, they only made 2 models in 55 years. But the idea that they made these models for long periods of time and produced them in mass really was smart. No electronics, of course, they're older vehicles. They wouldn't have anyway. But they were very easy to work on and get parts and to maintain them. And that is the real smart thing. And I think that's the way to go on vehicles. And anyway, now we're experiencing a shortage of vehicles. We've got vehicles in America that are manufactured sitting on lots, and they can't get the electronic components from China or wherever they are because of the supply chains that are just broken and slowed down. So anyway, this old school methodology of having spare parts easily available, because there's an abundance of vehicles that have been manufactured with interchangeable parts, just makes a lot of sense. And I don't know if that was necessarily planned. It could have been planned by the Soviets. My viewpoint back then was, oh, they don't have the means to really come up with new things all the time. And as Americans, we like to come up with what's new, what's the latest changes and all that sort of thing. So I don't know if it was the Soviets did that because they weren't capable of manufacturing a new version every year. But when you think of the cost of doing that, it probably didn't make sense for them. So it could have been a twofold approach. One is it wasn't easy necessarily for them to do that, but it made a lot of sense not to do that, just to keep making the same models over and over again. Anyway, that's the story of my Russian Jeep I left in Mazar-i-Sherif. And then there's a few more stories, or another story. I don't know exactly what happened to the Jeep. Dan lost his life in Afghanistan, and I think the Jeep was with him when that tragedy occurred. And I don't know, it was in a remote area, so I don't know if the vehicles on that particular trip were ever recovered by the organizations that were involved in sponsoring a relief effort. Anyway, so I'm not sure where that Russian Jeep is. It either fallen into the wrong hands or was reclaimed by an organization that could have had the rights to take that. So anyway, that's my story for now. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or if you have any information about these Russian Jeeps, I'd love to find out more, or what you know, or if you have any stories to tell about these vehicles, that would be awesome.